So my name is Natasha Mankikar, and I'm a senior consultant with the Red Pen. Let me start today's session by introducing you to the Red Pen. So the Red Pen has been a part of the education consulting landscape for the last 10 years. While we're based in Mumbai, we have a network of consultants that spans the US, Europe, Dubai, India, and Singapore. We work with thousands of clients across a broad spectrum of services. So it encompasses services as early as high school students to covering undergraduate, postgraduate, and MBA admissions. Relevant to MBA admissions, we're a part of the AGAC, which is the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants. And we interact regularly with schools' admissions committees and directors. So we gain early insights into admission trends and news from leading universities. We commit to maintaining the highest ethical standards while working with consultants and we're working with applicants. So applicants put forward a narrative that is really authentic to their experience, and create a strong application that speaks to admissions committees. So my responsibility with the Red Pen is working with client essays, creating strategies for them to create essays. And over the past 2 years, I've worked with hundreds of clients, and we help them put together applications that really make a winning case across global MBA programs, and have seen tremendous success over the last 10 years. So this slide kind of indicates the kind of successes we've seen. In today's session, what are we going to cover? So in today's session, we're going to break down critical elements of the INSEAD application process. So we're going to give you insights into school research, which campus you should look at. We're going to talk about the application process in more detail. So we'll help you unpack how to address questions around essays, essay questions. We're going to talk about the video questions as well. We're also going to talk about preparing for the interview and a couple of tips around that from our panelists. And we're also going to talk about the alumni experience. So, our panel is going to give us insights into what it means to be an alumni and how they benefit from access to, a wide network of peers. We'll also just, before we start the conversation, let's just talk about INSEAD, branded as the business school for the world, with campuses spread across multiple locations. INSEAD is at the top of the wish list for a lot of the applicants that we work with, and indeed for applicants who really want to be a part of a truly global experience with, a very diverse class with people with, more than 90 nationalities as part of the class. We find that the application process for the school is extremely comprehensive. It's exhaustive. It covers your professional aspirations. It really covers your personal traits. And, there's a lot for us to talk about today. I'm going to now start by introducing our panel and asking them to just tell us a little bit about themselves and, maybe what was the most interesting experience they've had while at INSEAD. So I'm going to first ask Garima to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Garima, and I'm INSEAD class of 2010, the July batch. I'm a former investment banker, have run a hospitality business in the past, and I'm currently in the education space. I think for me, just the two campus experience for INSEAD was the cornerstone, was the highlight. Spending some time in Asia as well as in Europe, an old economy, new economy, rural campus versus urban campus. I feel like I managed to pack in a lot of experience and a lot of memories in the 10 months that I spent there.
Great. Vatsal?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Vatsal. I'm from INSEAD class of 16D. I spent most of my time on INSEAD on the Singapore campus. In fact, I spent just a few weeks on the Fontainebleau campus. Obviously, it was a decision which I made because I was more comfortable, always wanted to be in Singapore, in that city, and obviously almost all of the time on campus with a very diverse group of batchmates, very interesting people from all different backgrounds, industries, was the highlight for me. So the consistency of just the amazing experiences I had is something which I still am very fond of. So there was no one particular highlight for me. And right now I'm working with Amazon Web Services. I'm based in Gurgaon. I lead customer advocacy for them in India. Previously, I was with Disney Hotstar based out of Bombay, where I led communications and strategy for the country director. Before INSEAD, I was a trained financial journalist. So I have experience with Thomson Reuters in Singapore, and I was a global macro columnist for India's largest news wire, INS.
Great. Mitra Bina.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mitra Bina, class of 16D. Prior to INSEAD, I was working in the manufacturing and banking sector. And post INSEAD, I'm working in the technology sector, looking into roles such as strategy, controllership, product finance, and FP&A. Things that I liked at INSEAD already covered, and just like Vatsal said, not any one particular instance, but I love looking back. I love the pace of activities. It really set the tone, the fast moving life. I like the flexibility to choose the electives that I wanted to study. And lastly, the acquaintances and the friends that I made. Those were the highlights at INSEAD. Thanks.
Hey, Kaushik.
Yeah. Hi. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kaushik, and I am from INSEAD class of 15B. Currently, I'm a tech entrepreneur, have my own startup in the logistics space. And before INSEAD, I was in operations. I was actually working on board a vessel. For me, the highlight was obviously, the learning curve was extremely steep. And, you are probably one of the dumbest guys in the room. And I think that really challenges you and forces you to, always constantly be on your toes and really have a very good experience in terms of learning. I think for me, learning has been the highlight in my INSEAD journey.
Thanks. So, I'm going to dive straight into a couple of questions that I have, based on the introductions that you've given us. One of the things which I'd really like to understand from each of you is, why INSEAD? Why did you choose INSEAD? Kaushik, do you want? Yeah, Garima.
Yeah, I'll go first because I think I kind of touched upon that in my first answer. So I actually previously spent a lot of time studying and working in the US. So when I started thinking about my MBA plans, I wanted to be in a different geography and I wanted to do a shorter program. So for me, the 1-year program was the big appeal. Obviously, that was basis what my background was. And also wanted to be in, as Mitra Bina said, an environment where the program was very flexible. There was no particular track that you needed to follow. It was a very general management focused program. And as someone who wanted to be an entrepreneur in the future, I think it really put me in the right spot at the right time.
I can go next.
Yes,
so
please.
before INSEAD, I had almost 6+ years experience, and I was looking for a program which was very short. And I was working in Citigroup that time, and I wanted to shift from banking to the industry, preferably a consumer-facing industry. And I felt when I was doing my research with all the schools, I felt I wanted something also non-US school. So in Europe, I wanted to transition into the companies, and I felt INSEAD was the right place, which would enable me to get the roles that I wished for. It had the right peer set, the diverse and the competitive peer set, and that made me choose INSEAD.
Thanks.
I'll take this next.
Yep.
So yeah, for me, as both my co-panelists said, one of the key reasons for me was also the duration of the program. I had in fact completed my master's degree in finance in 2013. So one thing which I was very sure of, that I wanted a shorter MBA program, 10 months with the 2-month summer internship with the December batch offers. So it was a great choice. And of course, I had a lot of my close family, friends, my cousins who had all experienced the INSEAD MBA. And it's not often that you hear from a lot of people that it was the best year of their lives, right? And this was something so consistent from at least 7 or 8 people very close to me I heard from. So the more I read and researched about INSEAD, it really seemed like the place to go. And I was looking to be in Singapore, wanted to get a job in that region as well. So it just fit in brilliantly.
I think I'm the last. For me, I think the choice was obvious, because INSEAD is a very international school, and I've been sort of like on the road since I was 17. So I was looking for a school which sort of represents very diverse and international students, and INSEAD, I think, is one of the only schools where almost 96% of the students are not French or Singaporean. So it gives you that really international, diverse flavor, and I think that was that really cut it for me.
As you all speak about your experience at the school, can I also understand, how you continue to benefit as an alumni of the school? What are the benefits you have today? Kaushik, do you want to start?
Yeah, let me take that. Yeah, I think as an alumni, you hugely benefit. At least I can speak for myself. I have, I started up and I was in Singapore, and the alumni community in Singapore is extremely vibrant. So there's a lot of times you can reach out to alumni, set up meetings. It's very, very helpful for business. And even as I, sometimes come to India for a visit, even the alumni group in like cities like Bangalore, Hyderabad is also quite active. So, there's a lot of networking. There's a lot of, I would say, help that goes either way. So I think that's how I have, primarily benefited.
What I want to add to that is honestly the word generosity. Kaushik touched upon the generosity of time. There's also a lot of generosity of opening up, contact books. And also if you're traveling, you just have to send an email to the local, or like a message to the local sort of community there to be like, hi, I'm in town. Does anyone want to meet up for a coffee or for a drink? And people will show up. So I think everyone's also very generous with their time, even if it's just socially to meet someone new. So I think I can pretty much speak for everyone on this panel. You can go to any country in this world at this point. You will find someone to have a meal with.
That's true. I completely echo with Garima's sentiment, and they are very approachable throughout, in Delhi, in Bombay, and anywhere you're traveling. I was in London sometime late last year, met a lot of folks who had actually not met in the previous junior batch. And of course, I've also noticed that even people who are like 10 years pass outs before you, right? If you reach out to them on LinkedIn, they really do want to talk to you, and it's a very good, strong global network. And that's something I think, to be fair, is also true to a lot of top global business schools, not just INSEAD. So it's good to see that, and very helpful for anyone who's looking to apply.
I think everything is covered. Probably things that I would like to cover is, if I were to grow in my role, there are lots of resources that INSEAD has in their internal portals, which I have access to as an alumni. I can reach out to a subject matter expert in my community, and they are immediately out there to help. So if I need help with some strategic presentations, I typically reach out to my friends in MBBs and check out, hey, what are the things that, really counts in building the deck. And they generously spend their time and go through lecture and pointers. So apart from personal help, even professional help, I've relied on my network immensely.
Great. Kaushik, one of the things which I wanted to talk to you about, and you are someone who you spoke about, being in Singapore, benefiting from a vibrant community there, and all of you are from different campuses. So my question is, how does an applicant go about the process of understanding which campus he should be a part of?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's primarily two main campuses, one in Europe, in France, and the other is in Singapore. There's a third campus, which opened up in the last 4 years or so. This is Abu Dhabi campus. And then there's a hub in San Francisco. So If you're looking for full-time MBAs, there's only two campuses. You have a choice to sort of start. It's either Fonty, which is Europe, or in Singapore. If you are an exec MBA, you also have a choice of Abu Dhabi. In terms of choosing anything, I think it depends on your personal choice and your experience as well, what you want to experience. However, any campus you choose, you can always shift to another campus after spending like 4 months, which is 2 periods we call them at INSEAD, and that's how it works. So you can start in Fontainebleau, then move to Singapore, do vice versa, or stay with one campus if you like it. I think it's quite flexible that way.
I'd like to now just talk about the global nature of the program. We've spoken, even when you have introduced yourselves, you've spoken about the diversity and the global nature of the program that makes it truly enjoyable. But, I'm just going to focus on the application part right now. When you're applying to the school, how important is global exposure, when you evaluate fitment for the school or when the school evaluates your fitment for the program? I mean, is there a way to get a check, from the school as well? So, Garima, I'd really like your view on that.
Yeah, Natasha, I think I'll say two things to that, right? One, when we talk about global exposure, INSEAD does value that a lot, but I would sort of shift the language to say a global mindset. I think that's sort of more what INSEAD is looking for. They recognize that not everyone's had opportunities to have lived, traveled, worked abroad, but is there a way for you to sort of showcase how you've developed a global mindset and how you continue to deploy that in your daily life through work, through personal travel, all of that? In terms of sort of the evaluation, INSEAD does have a process where I think you can share your resume with them over email, and someone will get in touch with you to evaluate you, maybe offer you a phone call. I don't know if they do that for everybody. So for anyone who wants to sort of give it a shot, please do reach out to INSEAD. In terms of timing, I'd say, reach out at least 6 months before you're thinking of applying, because it gives you some time to really assess your own candidacy, figure out, if there are any gaps in your profile that, if they've highlighted to you specifically that you need to work on, whether it's taking the GMAT again or whether it's, something else professionally. So I'd say start early is a good idea on this one, and reach out to INSEAD.
Thanks. Vatsal, would you also want to contribute to that answer?
Sure. So I think Garima is bang on with this, that INSEAD does not necessarily, so they have 4 pillars, right? Of which one is international motivation. So it's really about global mindset and motivation, because it's really not possible for everyone to have had that necessary international work experience. And as Garima rightly said, there are many ways you can demonstrate this through, whether it's you knowing a foreign language, your travels, your work projects abroad, or just your interactions with global teams at your workplace abroad. And the fact that you can showcase that, you are someone who thrives in a dynamic environment, which is very diverse, and you like that international aspect of it. So more so, because what happens a lot of times, I've spoken to people, a lot of friends, a lot of close family members who think this is a necessary condition to get into INSEAD, whereas that is really not the case, right? A good business school and a good admissions committee, which they definitely are, they are really looking for more of a motivation. So even sometimes your lack of international experience, right? So I'll give you my personal experience. When I was applying to INSEAD, I had not worked abroad. I didn't know any other language, but what I really pitched for my profile, and which I'd like to share with everyone today who's tuning into this webinar, is that, so I was a columnist, but I was perhaps the only columnist for the Economic Times that time in India who was on a weekly basis writing columns on the global foreign exchange market, the global currency markets. Otherwise, they would just pick up the news feed from Reuters and Bloomberg and all the other newswire agencies, right? So it was my motivation to kind of go to INSEAD, get a job at a top tier investment bank in the sales and trading desk. So my story was, I wanted to showcase that, sitting in New Delhi, having only studied my master's abroad, but most of my work life had been based in India, but I had a global perspective and a global view on things. And I was really passionate to really take that to the next level and scale higher there, right? So So to any applicant who wants to apply here, and if you think on paper, on your CV, you can't necessarily demonstrate that experience with, say, a McKinsey or a Bain analyst or a private equity guy in Hong Kong, maybe. So there's nothing, if you can pitch your motivation mindset, that is the trick. So those are my 2 bits on that.
Vatsal, you interestingly enough, you mentioned the 4 pillars, right, that INSEAD looks at, and I find that when I work with clients, they struggle the most in terms of positioning their candidature so that they reflect these 4 criteria, across the application. And you want to allocate space. You don't want to miss out on showcasing your ability or your capabilities, your background for a particular pillar. I just want to understand, how applicants can bring these values or can demonstrate their fitment for these 4 pillars in the application. And I'd like to address that to Mitrabina.
Right. So INSEAD has these 4 pillars, which is the ability to contribute, international motivation, academic capacity, and leadership potential. Now, if I deep dive into these 4 pillars, so in terms of ability to contribute, what INSEAD is looking for, how can you contribute inside the class, outside the class, at INSEAD, outside INSEAD, like beyond INSEAD, right? And the way I would ask somebody to approach that is, list down your professional and personal strengths. Have an honest conversation with yourself, with your friends, family. What are your key strengths, right? So say I was in the banking sector, right? If tomorrow I had to, post INSEAD, I had to take on, turning around a company, a loss-making company into a profitable one, how could I bring my financial lens and how could I contribute, and help in turning around the company? That is one way of saying, okay, these are the skill sets I'm going to bring to the class, right? Personal strengths, are you a good team collaborator, or are you a more empathetic leader? Just have a list and highlight your strengths and bring these out in your essays with certain examples, right? So when you say I'm a very empathetic leader, you could probably take a time when you were working in a very fast-paced team, and you took the time back to coach your coach your juniors or coach your peers and achieve the certain goal, right? Moving on, in terms of, say, international motivation. So most of the INSEADers have worked or studied abroad, but that said, outside of their home country. So do demonstrate, experiences that you are comfortable or you're ready to integrate and adapt into an international environment. And Vatsal has already covered that exhaustively. So, it could be anything. It could be, if you don't have work experiences, you could just say, hey, I went on a backpack travel abroad. But, what did you learn out of it? To respect cultures, how to kind of integrate in with international or just, abroad, foreign people, and probably complete a trek, right? It could be something simple as that. At workplace, how did you really navigate the challenges of communication, not in terms of English, but even in cultural differences? How do you how do you navigate, communicate, and get the work done? So identify these instances from your experience, and again bring them out in your essays. We have a job, they have the job essays and the motivational essays. You can also mention in the additional essay. Third one, which is the academic capacity. So INSEAD definitely looks for a bachelor's, a minimum of bachelor's degree or an equivalent. It also gauges the competitiveness of the institute that you went to. That said, it's not like, oh, I didn't go to an IIT or I'm not a CA, will I get in? Of course not. Demonstrate, how you excelled at academics, because INSEAD is a 10-month program eventually. Even the D batch, there is a 2-month internship program, but in short, it's a 10-month program. So you need to have that academic rigor. So apart from your GPA score, even a GMAT score will matter. So don't worry if it's less, like, an average is 710, but make sure you demonstrate that, hey, I am academically competitive to, gel in the program, right? And lastly, the leadership program. Now, one might have the question that, oh, I just have 2 or 3 years experience and I'm not in the leadership position. How do I navigate this? Be it any role level, try to demonstrate any project where you have displayed leadership traits, right? Have you shown, comfort in dealing with ambiguity, team collaboration? So even if it's a junior role or a senior role, think through examples where you displayed these traits and achieved a common goal. It could be around conflict management. It could be around, anything like navigating again in different cultures, diverse cultures. So make sure these things are highlighted in your application and the essays. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does actually. So Mitrivina, what I'm taking away from this is the process of reflection, the process of really being able to lay out for the admissions committee, your personal, your professional, what you've learned from each of these spheres, and that kind of brings me to the essays, because the essays are primarily where we're going to see, these particular skills or capabilities, really laying them out for the admissions committee. And what I'd like to do right now is just focus on each section. So first the job essays, and then we'll talk about the motivational essays. But what I'd really like to understand is the job essays are pretty exhaustive. They consist of long form answers, and there's also more concise answers that you're giving as part of the of those 4 essays. So I'd really like to get your take on how to strategize for the job essays. And, Garima, I'll address that question to you.
Okay, all right. So one thing to keep in, the first thing to remember is that the job description essays are being read in conjunction with your resume. So, any school and, also INSEAD would first look at your resume. So keep in mind that what they're seeing on the resume is being mirrored in your essays is, of course, important. Now, there are 4 job description essays. The first essay asks you to talk about sort of what your current role is, what do you do in your current company, and sort of just a current description. The second essay talks about, hypothetically speaking, what would you be doing in this company if you were to stick around? The third company is just a description of your career from the time you graduated college until now. And the fourth job description essay is a goals essay. So I'm, as a shorthand, I'm going to call them JD 1, 2, 3, 4. The way I like to sort of address these essays, and the first thing I'll say is remember to answer the question being asked. I think that's just a general good piece of sort of advice to follow when you're working on essays. The one thing that I would say is when you're working on these essays, because they're so exhaustive, and to avoid repetition, reorder the essays in your head. Think about the third essay first, which is about what have you done from college until now. Really talk about your motivations for taking the decisions that you've taken. Why have you taken each role? What have you accomplished in each of the roles? And really sort of lay out for the admissions committee the story behind the resume. They can see the roles on the resume, but why did you take certain decisions? What did you do in those roles? Then I'd flip you to job essay 1, which is what are you doing right now, right? So you've gotten to the point from college until now. Tell me what you're doing right now. And then go on to job description essay 2, which is hypothetically, what would you be doing in this company? And really that essay is more about INSEAD trying to understand what is your career trajectory within the current organization. Now, if you work in a larger organization, which has a very structured sort of analyst associate kind of program, it would be a little bit easier for you to answer and for them to understand. But a lot of people come from very diverse backgrounds at INSEAD. You could be coming from manufacturing, the startup space, the social impact space, where there are not clear pathways laid out by a certain department. So it really helps INSEAD understand what your trajectory would be within this organization, and what would it look like generally for someone coming from that industry. And then I would tackle the last essay, which is the goals essay, which is a very forward-looking, laying out sort of your career aspirations. And and then one tip there would be to really highlight, again, really hit home on your global experiences or your global motivations when it comes to the goals essay. So I think that's how I would tackle the job description essays.
Great. And when you talk about global motivations, Garima, would you be able to just shed some light on that?
Yeah. So, specifically for something like a job description for a goals essay, I think INSEAD is interested in knowing, have you thought about where you see your career going internationally? Are you keen on working in a country outside of your home country? What do you envision your role to be, your contribution to be, in which part of the world? So, since Vatsal mentioned, not everyone's had that international exposure before, but the INSEAD wants to know, do you have any plans to do that now? And that's where you can really showcase sort of the global mindset, the motivation. For the job description essays, the first 3 months, you can only touch upon them if you've actually had that experience. And if you've not had that physical experience, then as Mitra Bina mentioned earlier, talk about projects, talk about having worked with clients while you've been sitting in your home country, with clients situated outside of your country. So there are various ways to highlight that. You just have to reflect on what those experiences have been before you put pen to paper.
Yeah, I agree with you there. One of the interesting things as we're speaking about job essays, I want to just shift focus to the motivational essays. Now, the motivational essays, I've worked with scores of clients, applying to INSEAD. And, when we work on strategy for the motivational essays, we find that the 3 motivational essays take perhaps the most time to put together, as part of the application, because you're talking about, your strengths, your weaknesses, you're talking about success, you're talking about failure. These are, intensely personal, and, you don't want to be in a position where, you're looking at only the positives without focusing on the negatives. If, another question that I commonly get is, when I talk about failure, when I talk about, when I talk about weaknesses, how does that make me look, to someone reading my application, to someone from the admissions committee? And you really want to have a very, a very balanced kind of application, or a balanced kind of view, So I would really want to understand, what is your take on approaching these essays, and what should applicants not be fearful of, if I can put it that way? So Kaushik, if I could address that question to you.
Absolutely. I think the motivation essays are, I would say, like the most important aspect for NCR application. And we got to understand what is the school looking for through these essays. They're looking for, number one, self-awareness. Number 2 is, your cultural sensitivity and flexibility. And the third one is your leadership potential. So I think the way the school curates people as well, or the students as well, are, they bring in incredibly diverse and, people who are extremely self-aware. And mostly, there's a lot of authenticity as well. So I would say, be authentic and, touch upon aspects which you're not comfortable as well, explore genuine weaknesses. I mean, the school doesn't want to hear stuff like, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, or, sort of strengths dressed up as weaknesses. Talk about, delegation, if you have problem with delegating your responsibility or something like that. And the best thing about this essays is you can also highlight your cultural, sort of sensitivity or cultural awareness as well, whether be it in weaknesses, be it in strengths, be it in like any other, reflection as well. So I think it's the way I would say, be authentic and explore these elements as to what the school is looking for. And I think that's my take.
Vatsal, I'd like to, understand if there's something you want to add to that,
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Okay, so firstly, this is, I think, in the top 10, 15 global MBA programs. I think, you have the essays where the applicant just supposed to talk about his short-term, long-term goals, his or her short-term, long-term goals, and how the school would contribute. And we always try to flesh out this personal inspiration story. But here, INSEAD, what it's really giving the applicant is so much of freedom and leeway, and to really talk about himself or herself, right? And as Kaushik said, I think, so there is no framework to approach these 3 questions, right? Like Garima had a very clear structure in mind when she said how to approach the jobs essays. But here, I think, again, borrowing from Kaushik, the word is self-awareness, right? But what comes after that self-awareness, at least for when I was writing it, or some of the people I've helped write these essays, they're free to really showcase any strength they want, right? It's really not about leadership. You can surely highlight that. It could be anything. It could be making these bold moves in your career or even your personal life, explaining some inflection points and why they mean something to you. But the idea is really to leave the reader with a sense that, okay, I read something really interesting and a compelling storyline here, right? So whatever you write it deeply, showcase that why it means so much to you. Why are we discussing this? Why are you choosing the 400 words given to you, for example, to explain what are your key strengths and weaknesses, right? So for this personal motivation essay, I mean, I would really think, I would put myself outside the shoes of, okay, I'm applying to a business school. So I'll talk about my leadership. I'll talk about my collaboration skills. I'll talk about my great project management skills. You really can be bold and think out of the box and try hitting it out of the park here, in my view, right? This of course, my independent opinion. And I think Natasha also mentioned about the second motivational essay, which is, it asks you to talk about your strengths and weaknesses. So one of the common, trends I've seen, especially when it comes to weaknesses, that people really shy away from really amplifying or magnifying their weakness. As you said, that what will the admissions committee think? Because, so whatever my little advice on this would be, whatever your failure is, like, accept it was absolute failure, write about it boldly, and then talk about your learnings from that failure. That question also asks you how it impacted your relationships with others. So focus on this, right? So it's actually a pretty tricky communications exercise, right? In 400 words, they're asking you to do so much, but you have to touch upon so many little aspects there. For the second motivational essay, especially, right? Your strengths, your biggest strength or your failure, what you learned from it, and lastly, how it changed your relationship with others. So this requires a lot of self-introspection. It takes a lot of time. So don't worry to any potential applicant who's listening that if things don't come to you soon. And yeah, be self-aware. That's what Kaushik also said. That is the number one. I would really work backwards from there, right? Like, what do I really want to say about myself? And the third one, which I'll also briefly touch upon, is the extracurricular activities and how, bold, underlying the word, they have enriched you, right? So it's really not about that I played tennis or football, or I like dancing, I like traveling. Those are really very generic things to say. You really have to put yourself in a position and ask yourself, okay, without this activity or without doing this or spending so many hours a month of this on this activity, how would I be different? How has it really enriched me, as literally the question's asking, right? So if you want to talk about your passion for photography, if you want to talk about your passion for traveling or scuba diving, it really cannot be the simple matter of fact that I've traveled to 30 countries, right? And you show your international motivation there. So you need to tell the reader, in this case, the AdComs committee, why is that travel meaningful to you? How does it enrich you? What are your key takeaways? What do you learn from each time you travel, right? So it is a little more nuanced than just writing a personal rant, right? So just think, and be more self-aware. Yes.
I'm loving how the conversation's going. While I'm asking you questions, and I still have more questions to ask you, I just like to tell the audience that, while we're having this discussion, if you have questions, and I'm sure questions will come to your mind, just given the trajectory of this conversation. So please do add it to the Q&A section. And, we will get to it, I think, after another couple of questions, which I have for the panel. So do start typing out, questions that you have for us. Vatsal, while I have you, I would want to also ask you about, the video essays section. There are 4 that an applicant will need to do. I just like to understand if you have any tips on how to really nail those essays.
Okay, so firstly, full disclosure, the video essays came into effect after I graduated. So I'm not speaking from experience, but yes, I have spoken to many people, many friends, and there are certain basic tips. So there are 4 questions, right? And you get a 48-hour window after you submit your application to do these. But really, so the first thing to really know or understand is, what is the school looking for here, right? You have had the chance to express yourself via your personal motivation essays. You've had the job description essays. So now the school really wants to see that in a matter of 45 to 60 seconds, you can be self-composed. You can give a structural, logical argument, right? You do not speak too much. You do not seem confused. You're giving a very clear thought process, right? So how I would really prepare for this is, I would bucket the questions into 4 verticals, right? One is just the INSEAD specific bucket. Second being the international motivation / leadership bucket. And the third being the miscellaneous bucket, which is really, they can throw any curveball at you. And fourth, again, relating to, I would say, 3 buckets, then not 4, right? So So I would say that if you prepare well in advance, you can have answers which fit any sort of question, because the questions can be range from anything to, okay, on your first day of your new hire, tell me how will you showcase yourself as a good manager, or something as basic as why do you want to study at INSEAD again? So then again, you cannot repeat what you've stated in your essays, right? So just prepare. As I said, there are many things. You'll find a list of 30 to 40 questions online. Have good answers, and have answers which are not very deep, because you just want to make a few points which are most important to you. Prioritize what you want to say and just say it smoothly. And of course, the camera basics, right? Dress up well, speak confidently, and just be camera friendly. Don't slouch, etc. So yeah, this is, and a good way to do it is actually just speaking to yourself in the mirror, right? Because a lot of times you want to practice even capturing yourself on video, right? So the first time you record yourself for these video essays shouldn't be when you're actually submitting it to INSEAD. So just these little basic tricks. And of course, since you've been through the application process, you've obviously done a lot of introspection. So as a natural follow-up step, this will come easily, but yet you would need to really prioritize. I would say that's the number one takeaway which I can give, right? Is what do I want to say about INSEAD? Don't say 5 things, say the top 2 things. What makes you an empathetic leader? Just say one thing, and don't just give a lot of jargon. Don't jam pack your answer because you want 45 seconds of just quality stuff going.
Vatsal, one of the things that I also wanted to check with you was that INSEAD doesn't really ask you why INSEAD on the application. So do you think, the video essays give you the scope to really answer that question?
Well, yes and no. If that question is not asked directly in so many words, it will look really forced upon, right? That why is he or she inserting why INSEAD? But I think what we also missed in our conversation was there is also one optional essay, right? Where you can further your argument as to why you're looking to go to INSEAD, this diverse community, international experience. And also, if you are very strategic about your application, one common thread which is running throughout all these essays is indirectly answering why INSEAD, right? Because your motivation for international experience, your motivation to be in a cohort which is so diverse, right? For example, INSEAD, our study groups there, which can be made of 4 to 6 people, they really make sure that they actually want to ensure there's conflict in those study groups, right? So you'll have different nationalities, different industries. It just so happens that even the personalities clash after you meet. So I think why INSEAD, given that they have so many essays, so I think it is answered throughout, right? So we don't really necessarily need a distinct point to call out why INSEAD. And that is what applicants should remember, right? That in each and every question or they are answering, are they also highlighting all of these motivations towards their 4 key pillars?
Okay, thanks. So, Vatsal, moving from now the video essays to the interviews, and this is somewhere where I'd really like Mitrabina to give us, her views. Like when you prepare for the INSEAD interviews, what are some of the things that you think applicants really need to be mindful of?
Right. So the interviews are a very important part, and typically alumni is very important to INSEAD because during the interview process, you're typically paired with 2 alums. One probably could be from your industry and one somebody else, just to keep the diversity check in mind. The interviews could range somewhere from 30 minutes to even 2 hours, and pre-pandemic probably even like longer duration. But ways to start off preparing for the interview is, first of all, research on your interviewers, right? You could probably Google them or search them up on LinkedIn. It's fine. This will just help you to know more about who you're interviewing with and prepare those icebreaker questions so that, you just set the tone of the interview, right? The interviews are typically conversational, so be prepared for a thorough dialogue nonetheless, that explores your background, your career path and why the business school, right? To approach this, I would say that, again, go through your personal and professional journey in deep, identify instances which you can highlight, to the interviewer, identify experiences where you have demonstrated teamwork, diversity, international, experiences and leadership skills, right? Make sure that you have a clear understanding of the path of your career, right? Like why you have selected certain roles at certain stages of your life, of your career journey, and what all have you gained from there, right? So identify the rationale behind the roles, and also it is important to be very clear about your future goals post INSEAD, right? Like why you wish to be in a particular career sector, and how will INSEAD help you to achieve that goal, and you know uh, how can you contribute back to INSEAD even post the school, right? So these are the main things that you should keep in mind. So if asked a question, hey, you want to get into consulting, so how will INSEAD help you? Suppose you're coming from banking, maybe you can get into consulting on your own. So be very thorough that, okay, at INSEAD, I will have access to these tools. I'll have access to networking with the employers of my choice. And that is something what I'm looking forward for INSEAD, to INSEAD. And at the same time, I'll be part of the network. INSEAD has 40% people getting into consulting roles. So I want to be part of that network where I can rely on and as well as help my network, right? And lastly, just have also make sure you have fun, because it's not a grilling interview. It's a genuine occasion to also know more about the school. So have questions for your interviewers, know more about the school, know more about the culture, understand if you're a right fit for the school. Yeah, that's all I would say.
One of the things you touched upon, Mitrabina, in terms of questions for the interviewer, do you have any tips in terms of, what the applicant should do, when preparing for the questions they want to ask the interviewer? Because, the last thing they'd want to do at that point is to appear not prepared, because, you don't want to ask a question that sounds like you've not done your research before you have come for an interview. So any tips around that?
Yeah, so tips would be, say, if your interviewer is somebody who's a recent graduate, definitely ask about the person's experience and, what all ways INSEAD helped them, and, know more about the school culture from them, because I'm sure everyone does their research and they reach out to people even before this interview happens. But this is a formal place where you can ask probably specific examples of, what all clubs were they part of, how have those clubs helped them, if there were any professors they should look forward to, because you can go through websites and all the materials on listed there, but probably they can give some exciting insights, like they have the annual sports competition among all MBA schools. I hadn't found this before in my research, but my interview mentioned something about that. And if your interview is somebody who is much more senior, it will be great to ask about that person's journey post INSEAD, and how the school has helped him, how he has contributed and enriched from the school. So I think these are the typical areas which will benefit you also to understand if the school is the right fit for you, and if you'll be adapting to the school life, right?
Thanks. One of the things which I'd like to ask all the panelists is that we're in March right now. If you had to give one piece of advice, to applicants who are preparing to apply to INSEAD and who started researching, what they want to do, post MBA, things like that, what is one critical element that you would ask them to focus on at this point? And if I could start with you, Garima.
Yeah, I think we've touched upon this in various forms through our discussion today, but reflection. I mean, the INSEAD application is extensive, and we've spoken about 7 required essays, 2 optional essays. Then there's the resume. There's real estate on the recommendations, which is something again we haven't really touched upon today. So reflection is very important. It's very important for you to evaluate your own journey, and again, to use the word motivations, not just international motivations, just right. Why the MBA? I think if you don't understand your own journey, your own story, that why MBA part and why do you want it? Why do you need it right now? Those answers become harder to put across. So think about your journey, talk to friends, talk to family. You know, when we talk about the strengths and weaknesses essay, I always say start with your friends and family. They know you better than, you know, sometimes you know yourself. So gather as much information on yourself. There's always this thing of like, you know, oh, network with the school, get to know the school better. Yes, you should be doing that. But the INSEAD application really lends to you needing to understand yourself better before you dive into writing the whole thing.
Yeah. Vatsal, what's your take?
Yeah, so pretty much very similar to Garima's. And again, it boils down to the fact that, you know, we have to write so much. There are 8 to 9 essays. So it's really about gathering your thoughts. Really, what do you want to say? Because even though the question on what are your long-term goals and short-term goals is simply a statement of fact, it's just 100 words, but everything really has to work backwards and fit, right? So it does take a lot of time. And I would suggest that whoever wants to apply starts at least 3 to 4 months in advance at the minimum.
Mitrabina?
Yeah, I think Garima and Vatsal covered it exhaustively. Things I would like to add is, start engaging with the school right away. Attend webinars, speak to the adcoms, and introduce yourself, because in today's era of the virtual connectivity, make sure you stand out. You show your genuine interest for the school, right? It's just like understand, okay, what are the latest trends that INSEAD is focusing on? Are they focusing on diversity? Are they focusing on leadership? You'll understand all these by engaging with the team, right? Secondly, I would say, yeah, apart from self-reflection, if you feel you have any weaknesses, start working on them also. Like a lot of times, people just realize while writing the application and the essays that, oh, they focus a lot on extracurricular activities and I have zero extracurricular activities. So you can probably start with the skill sets or the activities that you really enjoy, right? So even if it's like a writing activity, start writing, journaling your thoughts, open a club, and then journal your thoughts, like how does it enrich you, what are your learnings, and then these you can probably bake into the essays, right? So it shouldn't be like, oh, I just open the essay like 1 month before the application deadline and see, okay, I have zero extracurriculars, how do I go about it, right? So you can start working on them immediately. So I think these are the two things I felt like adding.
Yeah.
Can I just come in 1 second before you move to Kaushik
Vatsal,
on
please,
this?
please.
Because I think Mitbana said something really important, which is, you must research the school really well. And I think we didn't touch much upon this. For example, INSEAD has so many, like there's a bidding system at INSEAD for your electives, right? So there's so many courses which are so sought after, like there's a elective called Your First 100 Days. Then there's negotiations. So, and a lot of this content is available on YouTube as on webinars. So I would encourage applicants to deeply understand, if you're going to write about, I want to study marketing or negotiations or take advantage of the entrepreneurship in residence program at INSEAD, like what is it? Who are the people associated with it? How will I engage with it over there? So all of this information is available publicly. If you do a little bit of more research, you'll really get to know more about it.
I agree. Kaushik, before I come to you, I think I'm going to just add to Mitrabina's point that if you engage with people from the school or if you're asking for information, don't forget to thank them for that information. Don't forget to send out thank you notes when you attend events or when you, engage with the school. Because I think a big part of, the persona that you are reflecting is also about someone who is respectful of people's time. And I would say that's also something that I think is important to the process. So I just wanted to tag that on. Yeah, Kaushik, please.
Absolutely. No, I think I completely agree with Garima. I think introspection is, the most important. Speaking from personal experience, especially for folks who don't come from a business background, I think the biggest challenge is communicating your story. If you are not from a corporate setting, it's very difficult because you're, especially from the armed forces, oil and gas, shipping, because there are a lot of transferable skills we could highlight. And I think understanding your story and then condensing it down, presenting it in a very non-technical way to an adcom, I think that's got to be like, challenging, but it could be done. So I think for non-business folks, especially, you have to think hard on how to sort of, dumb it down to an adcom, or, to anyone, to a neutral person who does not know much about your story. I think that's one piece of advice I can give.
Yeah, I think that's extremely important as well, right? Because you cannot assume that someone who's reading your application is, an expert in the field that you're coming from. So you need to ensure that whatever information you're giving is comprehensible to someone who's not from your specific field. So yeah. I had a couple of questions that had come in, and I'd like to just address them to the panel. So what about scholarships? Can one of you shed some light on how to go about researching scholarships and, how to go about applying for them? Would anyone specifically want to take that?
So I can start with that. So obviously, there are scholarships which INSEAD offers, and then there are external funding options which one can look at. The thing to remember is you are going for an MBA program. Scholarships are not really easy to get. I did manage to get a diversity scholarship at INSEAD. The average funding is, if it's still the same, it's between 13,000 to 17,000 euros. They are divided into many categories. There are some ones for specifically doctors or lawyers or legal practitioners, to if you're a woman from Nepal or other emerging countries. So this portal opens up once you put in your application and you've got the accept. But yes, it's still a tough one to crack. There are essays which you have to write. So it's pretty competitive, but the most popular scholarship is the IAF one, which is really around diversity, and it's for approximately 13,000 euros. So I think most folks end up landing with that one. The other ones are very specific, so it's filtered down, and the eligibility criteria is only for a very few. So everyone who's admitted is not even eligible for that. So you can't take it personally.
Okay.
Yeah. And the one thing that I'll add to that is that, what Vatsal pointed out, that there is an application process to apply for scholarships. I believe in a lot of the US schools, that's not the case. A lot of times you're just automatically considered for merit scholarships. At INSEAD, you do have to apply, and you do have to look through. INSEAD's pretty generous in the sense that, a lot of it comes from alumni giving. There are hundreds of scholarships on that portal, or maybe at least 50, and you have to be able to filter through those to figure out, do I fit in the criteria? So there is some amount of research and reading that goes into it, and then positioning yourself through those essays. So that aspect for INSEAD is unique compared to some of the other business schools that one might be applying to.
Yeah,
I think I would like to add that as far as I remember during my time, it was first come, first serve. So the earlier you apply, the better it is, because, even before you get the results. So it shouldn't be like, okay, I wait for my results if I'm admitted or not, and then I write for the application scholarship. It's preferable to just submit probably just after your application.
Correct. And I think during our time, it was also scholarships were just available for round 1 and round 2 intakes, if I'm not mistaken. Then,
correct.
Yeah.
Kaushik, I'm just going to draw back on, the conversation we had around people from non-traditional backgrounds and people from diverse backgrounds. But, another question that I had received was, how favorable is INSEAD for career changers?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I think a lot of times people get asked these questions. So I think at INSEAD or any business school for that matter, they call it, location, geography, and location, industry, and function. It's extremely unlikely to change all three. It's very, very tough. I'm not saying it can't happen, but you have to probably do something like consulting, in a different geography, which sort of matches that. But it's easy to change. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's likelier to change two. But it's extremely hard to change all three of them, like geography, function, as well as industry. But it could be done.
Okay. And another question I have received is, how can I visit INSEAD on campus? How will it be viewed? Will I be viewed in a favorable light if I'm visiting the campus? So, Mitrabina, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I would say there are ambassadors and you can always visit the campus, and definitely this is something positive, but that doesn't guarantee an admission. But take this time to again understand if the school pace is right for you. You can audit classes, which means you can sit in a particular class and say you're interested in the first 100 days or negotiations class, and that is a skill gap that you have. Post INSEAD, you want to ace negotiations in your company. You can sit for that class, but at the end of the day, understand if this is something I really want to do, and definitely get in touch with the adcoms and mention how that has been helpful, what are the learnings, and bake those in your applications, bring it out, right? That is more important. So I would say it's definitely favorable, but again, does not guarantee admission.
If I may
Yeah.
also add one more point to this, that we are constantly talking about this from the perspective of application and positioning, but I think visiting any campus is important for you to be able to imagine yourself there. Like, maybe INSEAD is not the right place for you once you visit it. Maybe it's not the right vibe. Maybe it's not the right location. Maybe it's anything. Like, everyone has a personal wish list of what they want out of a program. So I'd encourage someone to visit the campus also to do that evaluation exercise, not from just, hey, will this increase my chances of getting in, but also from, do I want to go to this school? Like, will I be happy there? So keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. We're almost out of time, but I'm going to squeeze in one more question. And this is, again, Kaushik, just building on the conversation we've been having around careers. But, one of the questions I've got is, around the support that the Career Center would offer. And, especially for someone who wants to explore MBA, post-MBA opportunities outside of their home country. So I'm just going to open it up to the panel. Is there something that you guys would recommend? Would you want to talk about the support the Career Center offers?
Can I go first?
Please.
Sorry, Kaushik. Okay. Yeah. So in my experience and a lot of my peers, I think the support is exceptional. It's really good. And it starts right from day one, right? You have your CV workshops to a lot of help with your cover letters. So for example, because I started in January, so the finance recruitment for the summer associates starts happening as early as Feb, right? So I was interviewing with Goldman, Credit Suisse, Citigroup, and from the CDC, which is the Career Development Center, a lot of support, a lot of past questions, how to prepare for the interviews. It's given to you, and for me at that time, it was really helpful, and it really goes on till the very end. And I think even after you graduate from INSEAD, you have access to the internal jobs portal where all the companies list their job openings for the next 6 months. And you're always free to write to the CDC cell and the team members and across campuses, right? Whether it's Fonty or Singapore or even the Abu Dhabi, if you want a location shift to the Middle East. So yes, really helpful in my view.
Okay, I know I said it was the last question, but there's a question that's come in which I have very, very strong, opinions about. But a question I've received is that, about repurposing essays, from one school to another. So how does it impact my candidature? Because I've written an LBS essay, I've written, a pretty comprehensive application for another European school, and I want to kind of repurpose that material for INSEAD. Now, I would really like this panel's view on, this approach to writing your essays, because you have a lot of material while you're brainstorming, but what are your opinions on repurposing essay material?
I'm happy to take that one first, and then
okay, yes,
I'd love to hear others' thoughts also. One, I don't think there's anything wrong with repurposing materials, provided, you've gone through again that journey of figuring out what you want to communicate to any admissions committee, because you are you, it is your journey. Now, how you position some of it, again, goes back to what I said earlier, answer the question, because sometimes the questions might seem similar, but the questions are asking something very different. Like INSEAD's extracurricular essay is different from what I believe LBS asks. So the materials might be similar, but if you're just going to use that same essay because they're both about free time activities, you might be missing the prompt. So you should definitely repurpose. You can repurpose, but you have to be smart about how you're doing it.
So I think with that, we come to the end of our open session, our open Q&A session. And I'd like to just thank everyone who's joined today's conversation. So, all of you guys, I think the insight that we've received around INSEAD has just been tremendous. And I've really enjoyed the discussion. And to everyone who has joined this webinar, I would say that if you still have questions, or if you want to reach out to us regarding applying to INSEAD, you can reach out to us at the email address, which is on your screen right now. That's team.mba@theredpen.in. And I'll just repeat that. It's team.mba@theredpen.in. And we'd be happy to answer your questions. So thank you, everyone, for participating. And thank you, everyone who's joined the webinar as from our audience. So great. See you guys.
Thanks, Natasha.
Thanks, Natasha.